Good day, everyone. I am Shaina Cassandra T. Laid, and I am presenting a critic on contingent valuation, conjoint experiment elicitation, and behavioral economic valuation of Kutapar Big Tank Wetland, which was authored by Mangaiyarkarasi et al. In year 2025. So, this paper ambitiously attempts to triangulate multiple economic valuation methods to estimate the ecosystem service value of the Kutapar Big Tank wetland by combining the contingent valuation method or CVM, conjoint experiment or choice modeling, and behavioral economic valuation. The authors also aimed for a comprehensive appraisal that accounts for both use and non-use values. While this multi-method approach is commendable for its breadth and the depth and rigor of application in each method raise several concerns, particularly when assessing the credibility and policy relevance of the findings. So here is the overview of the study. It has an objective economic valuation of Kutapar Big Tank Wetland, and there are three methods that has been used during this inside this article, which are the contingent valuation method or CVM, conjoint experiment or choice modeling, and lastly behavioral economic valuation. Its goal is to inform wetland management and policy. So, starting with the contingent valuation method, the study leverages the willingness to pay or the WTP framework to quantify how much respondents are prepared to contribute towards wetland preservation. This is an appropriate technique for valuing non-market environmental goods, especially for capturing passive use values such as existence and bequest values. However, the method suffers from several classical limitations that are not adequately addressed in the paper. Hypothetical bias is a major concern, as the study does not introduce any real or simulated economic incentives, which means respondents might overstate or understate their true willingness to pay. Furthermore, the paper lacks clarity regarding the payment vehicle, whether the contributions were framed as taxes, voluntary donations, or fees, which can significantly influence respondent behavior and the realism of responses. Additionally, there is no mention of scope sensitivity tests, which are crucial to ensure that WTP figures correspond proportionally to the scale of environmental improvements proposed. The absence of demographic and sampling details also weakens the generalis- generalizability of the findings, as it remains unclear whether the sample represents a broad cross section of stakeholders, including downstream beneficiaries and non users who still derive value from the wetland ecosystem. So, the conjoint experiment or choice modeling approach provides a more nuanced understanding by examining trade offs among various attributes of the wetland, such as biodiversity, water quality, and fishery resources. This method has the advantage of revealing which aspects of the ecosystem are most valued by the community, thereby offering practical insights for policymakers. However, the paper does not provide sufficient detail about how the attributes and levels were selected, nor does it clarify whether local stakeholders were involved in defining these scenarios. Without such participatory input, there is a risk that some of the choice sets may not accurately reflect community priorities or real-world trade-offs. Additionally, while conjoint analysis can yield rich data, It is also susceptible to respondent fatigue, especially if too many attributes or scenarios are presented. The study does not indicate whether such risks were mitigated. Moreover, the absence of advanced econometric modeling, such as mixed logit or latent class models, limits the depth of analysis, particularly in capturing preference heterogeneity across different demographic groups. So, the inclusion of behavioral economic valuation is a progressive and innovative choice, recognizing that real world decision making often departs from purely rational models. Behavioral economics can enrich valuation by accounting for factors like framing effects, cognitive biases, and loss aversions. However, in this paper, the behavioral component appears underdeveloped. It is presented more descriptively than analytically, and the integration with CVM and conjoined methods is not clearly articulated. Importantly, the behavioral experiments lack real incentives, which undermines their ability to accurately capture um, true behavioral responses. Furthermore, the study does not clarify whether these behavioral insights were embedded within the choice modeling scenarios or treated as standalone exercises, leaving an unclear picture of their methodological contribution. Across all three methods, there are overarching concerns that weaken the robustness of the valuation exercise. The potential for double counting is notable, especially when using multiple methods that may overlap in valuing similar ecosystem services without appropriate adjustment. The paper also falls short in explaining how these valuations translate into actionable policy recommendations, which is a critical shortcoming given that the stated aim is to inform wetland management and conservation strategies. Moreover, the absence of sensitivity analysis and robustness checks means that the reliability of the estimates remains uncertain. Without such tests, it is difficult to assess the stability of the findings under different assumptions or scenarios. In summary, the study makes a valuable contribution by recognizing the multifaceted economic values of the Kutapar Big Tank wetland and attempting methodological triangulation. The execution lacks the rigor needed for strong policy relevant conclusions. The paper would have benefited from greater methodological transparency, stronger behavioral experiment design, participatory scenario development, and more sophisticated econometric analysis. If these elements were addressed, the study could serve as a robust template for wetland evaluation, not only in India but also globally, offering policymakers credible, nuanced insights to support sustainable ecosystem management. And I guess that ends my presentation and my critique on the said article. I hope that you have gained something. Thank you so much for listening and have a nice day ahead.